So today we're going to talk about creating captions. We're going to figure out like what captions, what that means, and then using YouTube as a tool to kind of facilitate that and make that a quicker process. There's a lot of different ways you can do captions. If you're already familiar with ways to do captioning and you're more comfortable with that than what I'm going to cover today, there's lots of ways to make really good captions, and I'll try to cover what is required for captions. But if anybody has any questions, let me know as far as that goes. And then while I'm presenting, if anybody has questions along the way, feel free to speak up. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat and the participants to see if anybody raises like a little blue hand or whatever. But I'm comfortable with you interrupting me, so you can just chime in. I guess before I get started, are there any questions before we even start? Does anybody have like any particular things that they want to make sure I address today?
It's all yours.
Okay, then I will go ahead. So I have some slides and I'll show you some screenshots, but then I also want to get into, hopefully it'll be possible for you to actually kind of log into YouTube and see some of it, try some of it yourself rather than just watching me do it. So yeah, so my name is Tim Miller. I'm the Digital Media and Learning Librarian. And I'll post in the chat. I have a guide to creating captions with a lot of these resources here. So I just posted that URL in the chat. I help students create videos and digital projects. So I often will go into classes when people are working on creating a podcast or a video or website or something for a class. And accessibility is always one of the big things that I try to stress. It's something, though, that often people don't think about until afterwards. It's not like the first thing that people think about when they're creating a video, to have captions to make sure that it's going to be accessible for multiple viewers. And so hopefully today, at the end, you'll understand why that should be something that you're thinking about more at the forefront. So first, just to kind of give an overview of what captions are. So captions are basically just text that appears on screen as the words are spoken. So if you have a voiceover narration, any of the words that the narrator is speaking will show up on screen when they're speaking them. And that's the same if you're doing like a head-on interview. Like if there's captions for this recording later and you can see my face, those captions would show up right below my face. It should be timed with the video. So it doesn't have to be exact, but it should be pretty close to the same speed that the person is talking. A lot of the time there's context that's important. So you need to make sure that it's in the same, roughly the same time. There are open captions and closed captions. Open captions are when they're burned into the video, so you can't turn them on and off. Closed captions are when you can turn them on and off. And so when we look at YouTube, YouTube has closed captions. And that's the more, like if you're watching Netflix or anything like that, that's the more common type of captions or subtitles that you see, is that they're optional. At HSU, often in other educational institutions, oftentimes they'll promote open captions where they're burned into the video itself. And so like the HSU Google Media Library, where instructors will host any videos that they use for classes, those have them burned in. And that just makes it a lot easier to make sure that everybody has an accessible version of that video. If people are watching it on different devices, the closed captions the button to turn it on and off might not be there or something like that. And so open captions, when they're burned into the video, just make sure that that's always available for folks. And then there's a lot of different file types that captions can come in, and we'll look at that a little bit more. For the most part, you don't need to really worry about that. You're not going to be creating a file that has to be formatted in any of those formats. You could do that if you wanted to do that. And basically what those file types are is there's a time code that you have to type in for how long those words are going to be on there. Then you type the words in, and then you type in the new time code for the next chunk of time. It's pretty basic format. But like I said, you don't need to really worry about that. But you will see, because there's quite a few different formats that are used, file types that are used. And so there's also transcripts. Transcripts are different from captions. They're also very useful. But transcripts are more, they're in paragraph form. So rather than being in time with the person speaking during the video, it would be something that someone could read without even watching the video. And oftentimes they're not verbatim. So if someone is, so with captions, you want it to be pretty much exactly. So right there, when I was talking, I stopped mid-sentence and restarted my sentence. You'd want the captions to have all of those kind of errors that I made while I was speaking. Whereas with a transcript, you don't necessarily need to do that. With a transcript, it could be a summary of what the person's talking about. It could be if they were more eloquent, so getting rid of any ums or uhs, things like that, you can do all that pretty safely with the transcripts. Transcripts also might have extra information. So maybe since it could be read without the video, you might need to describe some visual item that's in the video that people can't see in the transcript. Or you could add graphs or something like that into the transcript. And so oftentimes a transcript can just be kind of a nice accompanying document, but it's different. The reason I bring up both of them, though, is because YouTube does have options for captions and transcripts, and they're both based on the same text. So in YouTube, they're kind of treated similarly. And so if you want to, you can create your captions in YouTube, and then you can export a transcript from YouTube, and then you could add other things to that if you want to. So you kind of have a couple more options when you're uploading things to YouTube and editing your captions in YouTube. And so ideally you'd want both, you know, like in a perfect world, if you had all the time in the world, you would have both captions or transcripts. However, transcripts are not really required, but captions are required. So the CSU has an ATI, an Accessible Technology Initiative policy that requires captions for videos that we create. Captions are important for people who have any sort of hearing disability, but they're also important for anybody who has a device problem. So maybe their device doesn't have speakers, or they're in a place where they can't hear their speakers, or they don't have headphones. Being able to read whatever content is on the, being able to read the content on the screen is very helpful. And then transcripts are helpful because if someone can't watch the video at all, they'd still be able to read the transcript. So having the more things you have, the more accessible it is for anybody who's going to be wanting to get the same information from your video. And so then there's the mechanics of creating captions. And this is kind of, you know, personal preference. So it depends upon how what your workflow is for creating your video. If you're the type of person who likes to create a script that you're going to read from, and you're going to read that, and then you're going to have like a voiceover for your video, you could use that script to create your captions, and that will make it a very easy process. But if you're the type of person, which is how I usually do it, is you kind of just speak, and then later on you make your transcript or your captions after that, then you would have to either, you know, manually type those up, listen, and people who are quick typers, oftentimes people will do that. But YouTube has an auto captioning program that makes that really easy. And it's pretty good. It's pretty accurate these days. It's made improvements over the last few years that I've used it, and in recent years, it's been really accurate. And it also will set those timings, and the timings are pretty accurate as well. So for the most part, you can auto-generate them in YouTube, make a few tweaks. There's not going to be any punctuation, capitalization. You'll have to do all of those things. But with just a little amount of work on your own, it'll help you create the captions. And if you do use a script, so if you're going to read off a script, if you go off script, make sure that your captions follow you going off script. So again, if you're with YouTube, if you upload your video to YouTube and you went off and you read off a script, but in the middle of it, you went off script for a few seconds, you could, instead of using the auto captioning, you could upload your script where it would have all of the punctuation and everything. And then you could just go into that point where you went off script and make the edits there. So the nice thing, so if you do use a script, it is nice to use your script to enter that into YouTube, because it will have the punctuation and the capitalization and any jargon that the auto captioning might miss. But you can do it either way. And then, so if you're doing it from a spoken recording, so me, I created a video a couple weeks ago about how to do podcasts. And so I just spoke, I didn't go off of a script. There's options with like Camtasia is a recording program that you can use, and you can type the captions in. You can type them into YouTube if you really want to. But YouTube has automatic captioning, automatic timings. And then if you don't want to use YouTube to host your video, you could just use it for creating the captions, and you can export the captions and then take your video down from YouTube. So even if you don't plan on hosting your video on YouTube eventually, to share it with people, you can still use YouTube to create those captions. And one of the nice things about that YouTube has is viewers can read the transcript on the side of the screen, or see the captions on screen. And I'll show you a screenshot of that. Yeah, right here. So this is an example of captions. So you're probably all familiar with this. So this is a promotional video for residence halls, I think, at HSU, or maybe it's just a full tour of the HSU, I forget. And so he's speaking, and those are the words that he's speaking currently, and they're showing up at the bottom of the screen. The transcript on the side, it's very similar. You can see highlighted here is the row, this is the part that he's speaking, but you can also see the part before and the part after of what he's saying. And so the transcript, you can kind of see everything line by line, and there's nothing on the screen here, versus the caption is going to show up on the screen. And people can't easily download the transcript from YouTube, but they could highlight all that text and copy and paste it into a document if they wanted to.
I have a quick question.
Mm-hmm.
Do interjections get captioned, or do you kind of like omit those?
You mean like
Yeah, like or likes, like filler kind of words.
There's a little bit of gray area there. I would argue that you should add most of those, right? So I say a lot. So I don't put in all of my ums, but if there's a point where I'm talking and I say a couple times in a row, and it might not be very obvious to someone who can't hear what I'm saying, that all I'm saying is then I would add those in. But if I am saying over and over just at the beginning of each sentence, I might not include all of those. Does that make sense?
Yes, and now I can't stop thinking of you saying
I say it a lot, and I try not to. I know I say it a lot, but
no, you're doing a great job. Thank you so much.
No, I definitely say quite a bit. I also noticed when I was doing my last captioning that I start a lot of my sentences with and unnecessarily.
You're just one long run-on sentence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, there you go. The likes and the other things, though, anything that's going to be part of an actual, like actual words rather than or whatever. Those I think you should definitely include. You'll see people who don't include those when they're not necessary to get the meaning. But I would say, that's part of the character of what the person's speaking, how they're speaking. Basically, if someone can't hear what's happening, you don't want to filter that. You don't want to censor that. You want it to be the same experience for someone who can't hear as for someone who can hear, basically. When it gets in the way of them understanding the content, then you might not want to include it. And so next, I'm going to show you how to do this in YouTube. And I'm not sure how well it's going to work because my internet connection isn't always the best, and YouTube is sometimes slower than others. So I'll show you a couple of screenshots first. So in YouTube, to get to a spot where you can upload a video, it's just in the upper corner here. There's this little camera icon, and you upload your video. It accepts quite a few different video formats. MP4s are pretty common video format that any video editor will probably use or have an option for. When you do that, it will take a while for the auto captions to appear. So depending upon the length of your video, it could take hours. You might want to upload your video the day before you plan on actually editing the captions. It kind of depends. Sometimes it's quicker than others, but you should be prepared, I guess, for maybe 10 hours or something for the captions to appear for a longer video. It's definitely not something where you just upload it and the captions are there immediately. And then once you've uploaded a video, so if you already have your video uploaded to YouTube, you can get to your YouTube Studio from clicking on your icon in the corner, and then you click on that YouTube Studio. And then in the YouTube Studio, there's going to be a menu on the side with subtitles. So they call the captions subtitles. Subtitles are technically different from captions. Subtitles will often include things like if you're watching a TV show and there's people fighting with swords, it'll say swords clanking or something like that in the subtitles, which captions don't necessarily need to include. But for the most part, when we're talking about subtitles and captions, they're the same thing. And YouTube kind of treats them the same. And then when you're looking at the subtitles, so this is a video that I've uploaded, when there's no captions at all, so if there's no auto captioning that hasn't started yet, there's no auto captions generated, you'll see this just big blue add option. And so that means there's nothing. You're just going to have a blank canvas to start adding your captions. And so if you want to use the auto captions, you'll want to wait until that changes to look like this, where it says duplicate and edit. So this means that there's already an automatic, and it says automatic there, there's already an automatic caption file that you can start editing. And they create a copy of it, basically, that you edit. And so then there'll be two different captions. There'll be the one that you create when you click duplicate, and then the original will be preserved as well. And so when you're doing that, there's a couple different options. So there's this, this is the editor. So when you click on that duplicate and edit, this is what you'll see. There's a text block, which is a newer feature in YouTube, and it's one that I personally like. It makes it pretty easy. This is a really short, I made a little clip here. And so the entire clip is 8 seconds, I think. And so it's just 2 sentences. But if it was, an hour-long video, it would just be a huge block of text going down. And so you can quickly kind of edit it just like you would a Google document or a word processing document. The other option is to do it with timings. And so if you click on this Assign Timings button, instead of seeing just a block paragraph like that, you'll see it with the timings next to it. And so, so it's just broken up into into the sections of how long the text shows up at the bottom of the screen. And that's kind of just personal preference, which one you like. They both work the same way. You can see visually at the bottom of the editor screen, this shows you the timing. So there's a timeline here at the top, and it shows you how long each section is going to be on the screen and what words are in that section that are on the screen. And as you edit up above, this text changes down here automatically. And it all happens pretty quickly. It's going to depend upon your internet connections. If you have a poor internet connection, some of this might work as quickly as you want. It should save all your work, but be wary. There is a saved draft button here at the top. And so again, if you don't have the best internet connection, you might want to make sure that you're saving draft every once in a while so that you don't lose any work. A few years ago, when they first rolled out this caption editor, it would not save your work at all unless you clicked save. But then they started an autosave, which seems to be pretty reliable. But I'm still just a little bit nervous about that because I've lost work when I haven't saved. So like any project, I recommend people save your drafts. And then when you're done, you can hit the publish button, and that will make the captions available to people when they're viewing your video. And that's pretty much instantaneous. And maybe it takes, a minute or something for that to happen. But pretty much right when you hit publish, those captions should be available for other people to see when they're viewing your video. If for some reason they can't see it and it's been a couple minutes, they might need to refresh their browser or something like that. But in my experience, that happens pretty quickly. So once you've got that done and you hit publish, you should be good to go. If you want to export your captions, there are a couple options. So back at when you're just looking at your video and you see that duplicate and edit link, off to the side there's those little 3 dots. And when you click on those 3 dots, it gives you an option to unpublish your captions, or to download your captions, or to delete your captions. And when your download options are a .vtt file, a .srt file, or a .sbv file. And when you're exporting to upload to another service, so like if you're hosting your video on Vimeo or something like that, the SRT and the FBV are really common. I'm not as familiar with the VTT, but probably any of those will work, but you'll want to check with whatever other hosting service you're using. So you'd want to check with Vimeo to see what captions they accept. And so that's kind of the quick overview. I want to show you though in YouTube, and I'm not sure, I rehearsed this a couple times, and I had mixed results in how quickly YouTube was responding. So I want to show you. Oh, and if you want to follow along, actually, I think I hid that link, so I'm gonna have to grab the link for you. Are there any questions though before we dive in? Not so far. It's actually a pretty easy process. It's a little bit of a time-consuming process. You do have to type, but YouTube has made it. They've improved it over the years, and it's at the point where it's pretty easy to use. So I'll stop screen sharing for a second. So this is a short video. So, the length of your video is really going to depend on how quickly YouTube can process it. So that's a link to a Google folder with a short clip in there where I'm just saying a couple sentences. And hopefully that should be short enough that you can upload it and it'll work in the next 20 or 30 minutes. But like I said, depending upon how what your internet connection is and what's going on with YouTube that day, it might not work out.
If the video is like 5+ minutes, would you recommend doing it like a couple days before? Does it usually like take days, or is it normally
No.
just like hours?
Yeah, for a 5-minute video, it really it's going to be different at any time, but I would think definitely within like 4 hours. If it's like an hour-long video, maybe overnight. I've had times where it's taken overnight, I should say, but most of the time it's within a few hours.
Oh, for sure. So it's never like multiple days or anything like that?
Not in my experience, no.
For sure.
Yeah, within like less than 24 hours for sure. Probably less than 12. I should have made a note of that for the last. I did a 20-minute video for that podcasting video, and I don't remember how long that took, but it was definitely less than 24 hours. I think I probably uploaded the video at the end of a day of work and then edited it the next day, something like that. Okay, so here's the studio. Oh, so I guess I'll go back to YouTube. I'll show you how to get there from YouTube. And you can follow along if you want to log into YouTube. So if I want to upload a video, I would go click on this camera, upload video. I already have my video uploaded though, so I'm going to go click on my icon there and then go to YouTube Studio. Well, actually, I guess I'll show you though what it looks like when you do the upload video. It's a pretty basic interface where you can just drag and drop your file. So when you're uploading your video, you can either click the select files to select your file, or you can drag it from a Finder folder right in here, and it will it'll prompt you to fill out some of the metadata, so like the title of your video, a description for your video, some things like that. But it's a pretty quick process. If it's a 5-minute video, the upload will probably take, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes before you'll be able to do anything with it. If it's an hour-long video, well, for 5-minute, probably less than that. Yeah. 5-minute video, I wouldn't worry too much about how long it'll take. By the time you go grab a cup of coffee or whatever, it'll be done. So when you're in your studio, you'll see all of your videos lined up here. And when you hover over them, you'll have the different options. And so you can edit the details of your video here. And so one of the things, don't remember where that is. I think it's under the more options. There will be a language option, and the default is English. If your captions are in English, you shouldn't need to make any changes. But you'll want to make sure that you're declaring the right language if it's not the default English. So if you have something that's in another language, make sure you change the language. The closed captions should also be given the right language option as well, and we'll look at that in a second. There's a caption certification option, and I don't know exactly what that means. And unless you do, I would just leave it at none. There's some sort of process though to certify the captions that is part of the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission. And so I don't think anybody's needs to worry about that. So you can just ignore that. But then on the side here, there's this, where is it? Subtitles right here, this icon here. And so here, I don't have any captions that I've edited yet. It just has the automatic captions that it's created. And so I can click duplicate and edit, or if I click on the options, that's where I can download, and I can download in those different file formats. But for now, I'm going to hit duplicate and edit. And so since this is a nice short video, it's pretty simple. I have just a couple sentences, no punctuation, no capitalization. One of the tricky things sometimes with someone speaking is it might not be clear where a sentence begins or ends. So like in my example where I said I start a lot of sentences with and, you kind of just have to choose when it's a run-on sentence and when it's a new sentence. It should just be something that makes sense to someone who's reading it. And sometimes people speak in a way that doesn't make complete sense. You don't want to change what they're saying, though. You want to keep it the same as what they're saying, because again, you're not interpreting what they're saying. You're just sharing with people what they're saying. So in this case, I would just quickly, capitalize this. I could probably put a period there, and it'd probably be good. I can play it back and listen to it though, and if I listen to it, well, here I can actually. I don't know if I turned on the sound for my sharing. So if I play it back, this is just a quick video for people who are practicing their captioning, just a couple sentences, and now we're done. And so I might say, those are two separate sentences. So that's where it's kind of a judgment call. When someone pauses, you might say, well, there was a pause there, but it wasn't a whole new sentence, or maybe I'm just going to put a comma in there. Those things are kind of going to be a judgment call, but again, you want to make sure that it's something that makes sense, so that someone who's reading it would get the right meaning out of that. So there's a little bit of interpretation there, but you're not going to change any of them. I'm not going to change the wording of this at all. I'm going to keep it the same. And then if I wanted to, I could change the timings as well. So like if it didn't show up on the screen in the right way, I could change that. So the first one, if it was on the screen for too long, maybe I could change it to end at 3 seconds. And then I would need to change this one to start at 3.2 seconds. So whenever you change one, it's not going to make the other one but right up against it. So you'll want to change both of those. If I wanted to, one thing that I found out that's actually really handy. If you need to add anything in there, it can be a little bit tricky. So if I add, if I want to add a new, whoops. Oh, so there, I guess what did it say? I'll show you that. So it says you need at least half a second free to insert a new caption segment, adjust the timings of this segment or the segment after. And so in this case, I'll just change that to 4. So I have a second between when those start and end. And so if there was something in there that was missed and I wanted to add a caption in there, I can add something here. And that's going to show up in that 1 second there. But actually what I found was when you're doing the edit at text, that makes it quite a bit easier to do that. What I found was that actually so like if I want to delete that, I'll just delete it just like I would in a Word document. And what I found was I actually, I was able to copy all this text, paste it into a Google document, and make some quick changes in that where I could, because I said I and I've and I'd a bunch, and the I's were all lowercase, right? Because YouTube doesn't do any capitalization. So I went in and I just did a Control F, find and replace all the lowercase I's to make them capitalize. And then I dumped it back in here, and it assigned the timings still very accurately. So if you're going to add something in there that was missing or something like that, you can always copy and paste it out, put it into another document, edit it there, and then paste it back in. And that was actually easier than doing the assigned timings and adding things that way, because then you need to change the timings each time you do that. I don't know. That's the first time I've ever tried that, though. This edit as text is a new feature. So I don't know how, if that's always going to work in every case. So we'll caveat there. And then that's really it. Like if I needed to keep working, I would want to save a draft and I could keep going. You can set the playback so that it pauses whenever you start typing. So if you're if you're working and you want to make corrections. If you're a slow typer like me, the person speaking is going to go a lot quicker than you can type. So you can pause it while you type, but then you have to go back and hit play each time. You can slow down the speed too, so you could set it to like half speed. Captioning, just a couple sentences. Sounds a little bit weird, but then you can probably keep up with it as you're typing. So if you have a lot that you need to go in and fix up, some of it you'll be able to, if you have a big chunk, you might be able to just quickly make edits and figure out where sentences end and begin just by looking at the text without watching the video. But for the most part, you kind of need to listen to the video as you're going through and making your edits. Again, it's kind of personal how well you're able to type, what your personal preferences are, but it is a little bit of a time-consuming process. The fact, though, that you don't have to type up everything is huge, because otherwise it would take you hours to do a 5-minute video, whereas with YouTube, you can probably do a 5-minute video in 15 minutes or something like that after it's created the auto captions. And so then when I click publish, now I have two different caption lines. So I have one that I published that's created by me, and then I have the original automatic one. And so here, if I decide, oh, I didn't like that and I want to unpublish it or delete it, I could always create a new one here, or I could edit this one. But for whatever reason, it always preserves this initial auto caption option. And then you can add a new language if you're having captions in a different language. And that's basically it. I mean, that was a really simple example. Did anybody upload it to see if they could try it out in YouTube? No.
I will later, Tim. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, and if you do have questions down the road, I'll put my, well, people probably know my email because we've been emailing back and forth. But you can email me directly and I can answer any questions too. There's also, if any of you are familiar with using Camtasia to edit video, you can create captions in Camtasia. And if you're someone who likes to type, that's a good option. And there's other ways to create captions, but this is definitely, I think, the easiest, quickest way to do it. And so it's the way that I always do it. It's the way I always recommend people to do it. But I do just want to recognize there are other ways to create captions. Oh, and I said you could upload the transcript. Is anybody going to be working from a script where you'll have a script that you want to upload to YouTube?
I might be, because like once in a while, Tim will have like press conferences, so I might have a script or so.
There used to be an option to upload by transcript, and I don't see that now, but probably what you would want to do is just go ahead and do the duplicate and edit, and then just paste it into that. If I go back to and then just paste it into the edit as text option. Yeah, I'm not sure, because YouTube, they recently made this change, so it looks a little bit different than it did before. And so I'd have to look into that a little bit more to make sure that there might be a different way to do that. But I think that's the only way I see to do it now. So the timings, the only thing I'm worried about is the timings might be a little bit off with that method, but it should work out pretty well. I don't know how YouTube figures out the timings, but it does a good job. Any other questions?
I just am curious about the recording. Will you share it with us afterwards in case we want it for reference or want to share it with someone else that's part of our team?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and Zoom's been pretty quick with the recording, so I might be able to send that right after this. Oh, and I should say, if you're ever doing a video in Zoom where you're creating the video, so maybe like you're doing a screen record or you're recording a meeting or something like that, Zoom also has features to edit captions in. And there's a video on this page. This is the URL I shared earlier. And I think it's this video here that goes over those options in Zoom. And I haven't used it that much, but it seems to work pretty well. Zoom will create a transcript. So you could always upload that transcript to YouTube as well. But there are a lot of good features in Zoom if you are using Zoom.
Sorry, if you do choose to use the transcripts that Zoom, like let's say a video is recorded on Zoom, you got the transcripts from Zoom, would you have to arrange the time on YouTube, or does YouTube do that part all by itself?
Yeah, so YouTube does it by itself. But like I said, I haven't done that yet using the new interface. And so I'm not exactly, there used to be a separate option where you could upload transcript to create captions. And now it seems to me that the only option is to paste it in here. Let me see if I can find a blank video here. I think this one's blank. There's no spoken part. So this video, there's no speaking in it, so there's no captions. So when you click on the add option, okay, here, yeah, so there's an upload file option, type manually, and YouTube has an auto sync. So if you upload your file and then choose the auto sync option, that should do it.
For sure. Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, now they have an auto translate option too. The Zoom transcript, though, might be less reliable than the YouTube auto captioning, though it might be the other way. So if you have a Zoom transcript, you have two options that you can use whichever one is better. Any other questions? All right.
Appreciate it, Tim.
Yeah, thank you all. And
Yeah,
let me know if you have
so
any
much.
questions down the road, and I'll email you all with the video recording.